What if I told you that a single man without an army, without official power, and without sufficient weapons, he succeeded to deceive two armies at the same time, and did it so perfectly that neither side realized the truth until it was too late? It sounds like fiction. It sounds like an exaggeration. It sounds like a movie script, but that's a true story, recorded, studied, and considered to this day one of most unbelievable episodes in military history. The question is simple, but disturbing. How could an ordinary person manipulate two enemy armed forces using only strategy, calculated lies, and cold-bloodedness? In real wars, a tiny mistake means death. One misstep, a poorly chosen word, an ill-timed glance, and it's all over. Now imagine being surrounded by two rival armies, both suspicious, armed, and ready to attack, while you become the weak link between them. There is no neutrality. There is no safe choice. Any wrong decision can turn you into enemy number one for both sides. And yet this man decided to play an even more dangerous game, fooling both at the same time. This is not just another one among many unbelievable true stories. It's one of those real events that defy all logic, an episode that proves that, at certain moments in history, the mind was more powerful than any army. Real strategies like this don't arise by chance. They are born from desperation, extreme intelligence, and the need to survive when all seems lost. And that's precisely what makes this story as absurd as it is fascinating. For centuries, wars have been decided by numbers, brute force, and weaponry, but there are rare moments when victory or survival depends solely on convincing the enemy of a perfect lie. Here we're not talking about a simple scam, but about two versions of reality carefully constructed, each tailor-made for a different army. Each general believed he was in control. Each side thought it had the advantage. None of them imagined they were being manipulated by the same man. Stories like this are almost never told in full. Many have been suppressed, forgotten, or treated as legend, but the records exist. The details are there. And the more you learn about this story, the more you understand why it has become one of the most impressive historical secrets of a real conflict. It's no wonder that historians still debate how something like this was possible without the truth coming to light immediately. And what's most unsettling isn't just the plan itself, but the context in which it all happened. A scenario of absolute tension, constant fear, and decisions made under extreme risk. An environment where nobody trusted anybody, and precisely for that reason, the right lie, at the right time, was accepted as truth. But to understand how this man reached this point, we need to go back to the beginning, to the moment when he realized there was no honest way out, and that the only chance of survival would be to create the greatest illusion of that war. Before continuing this story, I need to ask you a quick and extremely important request so that content like this continues to exist. True stories like this are not mere curiosities. They carry real strategies, extreme human decisions and events that truly change the course of entire conflicts. Understanding this type of content goes far beyond entertainment. It's about understanding how the human mind can be more dangerous than any weapon. So, as you follow every detail of this unbelievable story, comment below. What do you think this man did first? Do you think he started by deceiving one side, or did he already have a plan to manipulate both from the beginning? Your comment not only shows that you understand the content, but also helps this video reach more people who enjoy it. True stories that seem like fiction. And if this type of real-life event captivates you, if you like absurd historical facts of impossible strategies and stories that nobody told you in school, leave a like now. A like is the strongest signal to the algorithm that this content has value, that this story deserves to be spread. It seems simple, but it makes a huge difference. If you're not already subscribed, subscribe to the channel. Here, you'll always find unbelievable real events, real wars, historical secrets, and stories so surreal they defy all logic. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos, because the stories coming up are even more impressive than you imagine. Now that said, get ready, because to understand how this man managed to deceive two armies at the same time, we need to go back to the exact moment when he realized he wasn't just in the middle of a war, but about to become its most dangerous pawn. The setting for this story begins in one of the most tense and chaotic periods of real history, a time when real wars decisions weren't made solely on the battlefield, but also behind the scenes, in fragile negotiations, unstable alliances, and carefully calculated lies. We are in a contested territory, marked by confused borders, constantly threatened cities, and populations living under the permanent fear of invasion. It was neither a safe nor a predictable place. It was the kind of scenario where unbelievable real events. They arose precisely because order had completely disappeared. The historical period is one of open warfare. Two enemy armies advance with different objectives, but with the same certainty: to conquer, dominate, and eliminate any threat. Neither side trusts anyone. Spies are executed without trial, messengers disappear, and any wrong information can cost thousands of lives. It is in this environment of paranoia, extreme tension, and desperate decisions that this absurd story begins to take shape. One of those little-known historical events which don't usually appear in school textbooks, but which say a lot about how reality can be stranger than fiction. In the midst of this chaos, this man emerges. He is not a celebrated great general, nor a powerful king, nor a commander with thousands of soldiers under his command. On the contrary, he is someone seemingly ordinary within that brutal context. He knows the territory, understands the language of war, knows how armies think, and above all, perceives something that few perceive. In times of conflict, fear is worth more than strength, and information can be more lethal than any sword. This detail, though simple, is what puts him in a unique and extremely dangerous position. He moves between zones controlled by both sides, sometimes as a messenger, sometimes as an intermediary, sometimes as someone too useful to be eliminated. Every step he takes is observed. Every word he says can be interpreted as betrayal. Yet he remains alive, not by luck, but because he understands how to exploit human weaknesses in extreme situations. This man quickly learns that in real wars, people believe what most confirms their fears and desires, and that perception changes everything. Both armies see something different in him. To one side, he seems like an opportunity; to the other, a potential strategic advantage. Neither sees the complete picture, and that is the most dangerous aspect of the story. While generals discuss maps and strategies, while soldiers prepare for bloody battles, this man realizes he is at the center of something much bigger than he imagines. He understands that if he gets the tone, timing, or word wrong, he will not die just once. He will die as a traitor to both sides. The place where everything happens is marked by vital supply routes, narrow paths, forgotten villages, and strategic points that can define the course of an entire campaign. Controlling information there means controlling the movement of armies. And it is precisely in this scenario that some of the boldest real-world strategies ever recorded. Although almost no one knows them in detail, nothing here is improvised by chance. Everything is a consequence of extreme pressure and survival. This man doesn't yet have a fully defined plan at this point in the story. What he does have is something more valuable: limited time, privileged access, and the partial and dangerous trust of two opposing sides. He observes, listens, and learns. Each conversation reveals more than the generals imagine. Each military order spoken aloud becomes a piece of a deadly puzzle. And slowly, almost without realizing it, he begins to understand that perhaps there is only One way to get out of this war alive, to ensure that neither side knows the truth. Before we continue, tell me in the comments what you think of this man so far. Do you think he was just a survivor trying to buy time, or someone who was already thinking about something much bigger? Comment with words like survival, strategy, or perfect lie, so I know how you're interpreting this true story so far. From this point on, the situation ceases to be merely dangerous and becomes, literally, impossible. What was once tension has now transformed into a hopeless dilemma. On one side, a powerful, disciplined, distrustful army accustomed to eliminating any threat without warning. On the other, an equally lethal force with opposing interests, its own strategies, and the same intolerance for mistakes. Caught between them, this man, alone, without protection, without real authority, without soldiers, with only his own life hanging by an ever thinner thread. Any misstep would mean immediate death, not prison, not trial, death. If information seemed suspicious, he would be executed as a spy. If a promise sounded too vague, he would be treated as a traitor. If he talked too much, he would die. If he talked too little, he would also die. Real war's neutrality doesn't exist. Staying in the middle is the quickest way to disappear. And yet, that's exactly where he was trapped. The problem becomes even more absurd when you understand that the two armies are starting to demand different things at the same time. One wants information, the other wants guarantees. One suspects an imminent attack, the other believes it has a strategic advantage. Each side presses, each side observes, each side tests the limits of this man. He feels the siege closing in, not with walls or soldiers, but with questions, veiled orders, and silent threats. This is the kind of unbelievable real event that doesn't appear on battle maps, but decides destinies. He has nowhere to run. The territory is taken. There is no safe place. Exile is not possible. If he tries to disappear, he will be hunted by both sides. If he chooses to support only one, he will be considered a mortal enemy of the other. And if he tries to tell the truth simply doesn't interest anyone in times of war. Each army only wants to hear what reinforces its certainties. And this transforms reality into a perfect trap. The cruelest part of this dilemma is that he has no obvious advantage. He has no military strength. He doesn't control troops. He doesn't command resources. He's not officially indispensable, but he's become too convenient to ignore. Both sides believe they can use him. Both believe they are in control. And it's precisely this false sense of dominance that makes everything even more dangerous. Because in true stories that seem like fiction, the most deadly moment is when everyone thinks they understand what's happening. Tension grows with each encounter, each whispered conversation, each message transmitted. The risk lies not only in what he says, but in how others interpret it. A poorly calculated gesture, a slight delay, untimely information, all of this can be interpreted as betrayal. He begins to realize that there is no safe decision. Any choice leads to death. Any silence raises suspicions. Any attempt to back down only worsens the situation. It is at this point that the viewer begins to think exactly what he thought at that moment. This can't possibly work. There is no logical strategy. There is no honest way out. There is no manual for surviving something like this. Real strategies, known facts, don't apply. The battlefield is now psychological. The war is fought in words, in glances, in promises that can never be kept. And worst of all, he knows he's being watched all the time. The more he understands the magnitude of the problem, the clearer it becomes that he's not just fighting two armies, but time itself. The pressure mounts, the demands become more specific, and the margin for error disappears. It's no longer a question of winning or losing a war. It's a question of surviving the next day. And in this scenario, the only thing more dangerous than lying is being caught telling the wrong truth. Before we continue, comment below what you think goes through someone's mind in this situation. Do you think there's still an honest way out? Or is the only option to create a lie bigger than the war itself? Write phrases like "no way out," "lie or death," or "this." It can't possibly work in the comments, so I can see how you're viewing this seemingly impossible dilemma. It is precisely at this point that something changes inside his head. Not suddenly, not like a brilliant plan springing from nowhere, but as a cold and frightening realization. Telling the truth won't save him. Trying to please one side won't save him. Running away is not an option. The only possible path leads through something far more dangerous, to control what each army believes to be real. And this decision marks the birth of the double lie, the riskiest twist in this entire, unbelievable true story. He realizes that both armies live surrounded by fear, suspicion, and ambition. Each general wants to believe he has the upper hand. Each commander needs to feel that the enemy is one step behind. So, instead of choosing a side, he does something that seems crazy. He starts feeding the enemy two different versions of the same reality. For one army, it suggests that the enemy is weakened, poorly informed, and making strategic errors. For the other, it insinuates the exact opposite, with enough detail to seem true, but vague enough not to be immediately confirmed. Nothing is said directly. Nothing is stated with absolute certainty. That's the most dangerous part of the strategy. He doesn't lie like someone desperate. He lies like someone who knows too much, like someone who only comments on what he saw, heard, or deduced. In real wars, this type of information is pure gold. And each side begins to fill in the gaps on its own, exactly in the way that suits it best. That's how the perfect lie begins to hold up without needing to be defended all the time. For one of the armies, he suggests movements that never happened. For the other, strategic silences that create misinterpretations, small distortions, subtle changes in timing, true information mixed with false details, enough to generate confidence, but never enough to allow immediate verification. Each general comes to believe he is using that man as a tool without realizing he is being led by him. This is the point where the story ceases to be merely dangerous and becomes almost impossible to believe. What's most impressive is that both sides begin to feel they have an advantage at the same time. One believes the enemy is about to make a fatal mistake. The other is certain he possesses exclusive information. Both adjust their strategies based on these false certainties. And while this happens, this man remains in the middle, walking on an invisible line, where any slip means immediate execution. He knows he cannot repeat information in the same way. Each conversation must be unique. Each lie must seem spontaneous. Any contradiction could reveal everything. Tension builds silently. There are no explosions, no battles yet, but the atmosphere becomes heavy, charged. Orders begin to change. Troops reposition themselves. Decisions are made based on something that never truly existed. This is the kind of a real strategy, so absurd it seems like fiction. But it works precisely because it explores the most human side of war, the need to believe that one is in control. Deep down, he knows he's created something he can no longer stop. The double lie needs to keep feeding on itself. He can't disappear. He can't contradict himself. He can't hesitate. Now more than ever, he's not just a survivor. He's become an active player in a deadly game where two entire armies move, believing in different realities. And the most dangerous part is yet to come, because the more the lies work, the greater the risk of everything collapsing at once. Before we move on, I want to know what you're thinking. Do you think this kind of strategy could actually work today? Comment perfect lie if you think so, or sooner or later it would fall apart if you think it's unsustainable. If you want to go further, write in the comments, does information control win wars? This helps me understand how you're viewing this absurd turn of events. From the moment the double lie starts to work, the situation ceases to be merely risky and becomes uncontrollable. What was once a play on words now transforms into a chain of real, visible, concrete consequences. Troops begin to move, orders are altered, routes change, and each small change increases the risk of someone realizing that something is wrong. True stories that seem like fiction. This is always the most dangerous point, when the lie leaves the realm of theory and begins to shape reality. The first cracks appear in the details. A messenger asks one too many questions. An officer comments on something he shouldn't know. A minor delay raises suspicions. This man realizes that the information he planted is being compared with other accounts, other spies, other rumors. And in real wars, when different versions begin to converge, the truth comes dangerously close to emerging. Every conversation now demands absolute attention. There is no more room for improvisation. At times, he almost contradicts himself. A word spoken seconds too early, a detail repeated incorrectly, a look interpreted as nervousness. Small errors that individually would mean nothing, but together could destroy everything. The problem is that he can't control all the variables. The double lie grows, spreads, takes on a life of its own, and the more it works, the more people start acting on it, increasing the chaos. There are moments when both armies come, dangerously close to the truth without realizing it. Similar information begins to circulate on both sides. Unexpected movements raise doubts. One general suspects he knows too much. Another begins to think he is being watched. The atmosphere becomes heavy. Silences begin to mean more than words, and this man feels he is walking on terrain where any noise could trigger an avalanche. The risk now is not just in being discovered, but in being found out, by both at the same time. If one side suspects something, there's still a slim chance of survival. But if both realize they've been deceived, death will be immediate and exemplary. In unbelievable real-life events like this, punishment serves not only to eliminate the culprit, but to send a message. And he knows this better than anyone. The psychological pressure becomes unbearable. Sleeping becomes difficult. Each day begins with the feeling that it will be the last. He mentally reviews every phrase spoken, every detail omitted, every lie. You're told, in real wars, it is not the battlefield that destroys first, but the mind. And his is being pushed to the limit. Still, there is no turning back. The machine is already turning, and stopping now would be like throwing himself in front of a blade. At certain moments, the truth almost slips out. A soldier says something out of turn. A report falls into the wrong hands. An unexpected movement forces explanations that are too quick, and he needs to react instantly, adjusting the narrative, creating new layers of confusion, using the general's own fear as a shield. This is the cruelest part of the strategy. The more they distrust each other, the less they distrust him. Everything seems about to collapse. The constant feeling is that the next encounter will be fatal, that the next question will have no possible answer. Chaos grows, not with explosions, but with silent decisions made in tense, closed rooms and whispered conversations. It is at this point that the story becomes truly absurd, because two entire armies are being led by false perceptions, while believing they are closer to victory than ever before. Before continuing, I want to know what you've read so far. Do you think a lie like this can hold up when chaos increases? Comment, everything will fall apart if you think it's near the end, or chaos protects the lie if you believe that confusion is precisely what keeps everything functioning. If you want to elaborate, write in the comments. The greatest danger is in the detail, or the truth always comes out. This helps me understand how you are doing, feeling this absurd escalation of history. The plan doesn't end with a grand public revelation, nor with applause, nor with immediate recognition. It ends the way most people do. Unbelievable true stories. It ends in silence, confusion, and consequences that only make sense later. The lies this man constructed begin to collide with reality on the battlefield. Movements based on false information lead one army to advance at the wrong moment, while the other hesitates, believing it has a strategic advantage. The clash doesn't happen as expected by either side. Orders conflict, attacks are poorly coordinated, opportunities are lost, and in this chaos, it becomes clear that someone played a different game. One of the armies ends up paying the highest price. Not because it was weaker, but because it believed too much in an advantage that never existed. The other doesn't win cleanly or gloriously, but survives the enemy's mistake better. In real wars, this is enough to define winners and losers. There is no clear justice, only consequence. And this consequence arises directly from manipulated information, distorted perceptions, and trust placed in the wrong person. Victory, if it can be called that, doesn't come from strength, but from deception accumulated over time. When the dust begins to settle, the truth doesn't appear all at once. It emerges in fragments, reports that don't match up, orders that no longer make sense, movements that can only be explained if someone has been feeding different versions of the same reality. Little by little, the commanders realized they were led, not exactly defeated by one man, but pushed into decisions they would never have made if they had known everything. This kind of realization is humiliating in military contexts, and that's why it's rarely clearly recorded. And at the center of it all is him, the man who deceived two armies at the same time. Doesn't end this story as an official hero. He receives no medals, he has no statues. What happens to him varies depending on the version. But one thing is constant: he disappears from the front line. In some accounts, he is quietly removed from the scene. In others, he simply disappears from the political and military landscape, not because he was irrelevant, but because his existence becomes too inconvenient. To admit what he did would be to admit how vulnerable everyone was. What's most striking is not just the immediate outcome, but the subsequent impact. Strategies are revised, paranoia increases, trust in intermediaries decreases. This story becomes a silent example of the power of information in real wars. It's not cited in public speeches, but it's studied, discussed in closed circles, remembered as a warning, because it proves that you don't need an army to change the course of a conflict. It's simply a matter of controlling what each side believes to be true. That's why this story became a landmark in real history, even without widespread publicity. It challenges the traditional logic of war. It shows that brute force isn't everything, that the human mind, when pressured, can create strategies so absurd they seem like fiction. And above all, it shows that the line between survival and manipulation is much thinner than we like to admit. This man didn't win a war alone, but he proved something even more dangerous, that entire armies can be led by false perceptions. The legacy is neither a clear victory nor an absolute defeat. It's an invisible scar, a permanent distrust, a hard lesson learned too late. And while this man's name fades with time, the method remains. Even today, when one speaks of real strategies, with its control of information and events that seem unbelievable, this story emerges as an extreme example of what happens when no one questions the origin of the truth they receive. Before we move on to the next point in this story, I want to know what you think of this outcome. Do you consider it a victory, survival, or just an inevitable disaster? Comment silent victory, nobody won, or lies decide wars. If you want to be more direct, write in the comments, information is power, or the truth always arrives too late, because what follows makes one thing even clearer. When reality starts to crumble, nobody comes out unscathed. If you made it to the end of this video, that says a lot about you. Few people can endure this Such absurd true stories right up to the very last second. So subscribe to the channel now, because this type of content is made exactly for those who enjoy unbelievable events that seem like fiction, real strategies and stories that aren't told anywhere else. Now I want to know, what shocked you the most about this story? Comment below with one of these phrases, choosing the one that best represents how you felt. Information is the most dangerous weapon. Lies decide wars. Or simply, right, I made it to the end. I read the comments and that shows me who actually watches the video until the end. If you're here now, leave a like. This like isn't for just anyone. It's only for those who had the patience, curiosity, and genuine interest in this story. It's what makes YouTube understand that this type of content needs to continue appearing, and it's not coming out yet. The next video is now playing on the screen, and if you thought that story was absurd, the next one is even more unbelievable. Click now and continue reading.